Thank you for auditing Professor Skye's Record Review, the only first listen new music review show hosted by a French professor next to his dogs who are sunning themselves by the window. So it's technically my 1,000 subscriber special. I just reached that milestone last week. And when you become a content creator with 1,000 subscribers, there's a couple things you can do. One, you can start monetizing. I'm not going to do that. I'm not interested in making 10 cents on you being annoyed. And another thing is you can communicate with your fans. There's like a little thing where you can actually put comments on your channels, right? So that I am using. And I just put out, what would you like me to review? Now, I am interested in what you would like me to review. There are a couple caveats. I really am trying to only review new music, so music that's only, a couple weeks old. And it has to be something that I like, and it has to be something that I like enough and have something to say about it. So I got a lot of great suggestions. Some things were old albums, and I might get to those in the future in like a special episode, but this is really about new music. Some of them were good music, but I just didn't have anything to say anything about it. And then I hit the sweet spot. Someone suggested I review the album by Yves Tumor. Maybe it was the French first name, I don't know what, but I was very, very, very happy to have discovered this album. I remember when it came out, I saw it on my feed on Tidal, and I listened to it for 1 second, and it just didn't grab me. So this album is called Heaven to a Tortured Mind, and let me tell you, I am so into this album. I am very excited to talk to you about it today. I like it, it's new, and I have a ton of things to say about it. First of all, for no other reason, Yves Tumor is from Knoxville, Tennessee. Now, not only is my dear sister-in-law from Knoxville, Tennessee, but I have a great story about Knoxville, which I will tell you at the end of this video. Did I like this album? Let me show you how much I like this album. I like it so much that after listening to it 2 times, I straight up bought it off of Bandcamp. I just said, I didn't even just do the pay what you want for the digital version. I bought the vinyl. It's gonna cost $26. 26 pounds. Pounds, baby. So I am really into this album. And let me tell you why. The first thing I thought of when I listened to it was that it was like Prince reborn. Now, I want to be very careful here. There's 1 or 2 points where the music actually sounds like something Prince would do, but that's not what I mean. What I mean is there's a certain kind of mentally unhinged, androgynously erotic, funk soul vibe that cannot be created in a laboratory, right? You can't say, I'm going to make something feel like Prince and get that feeling you get when you listen to Prince. I get that feeling when I listen to this album. And I don't get that feeling when I listen to Mars Day and the Time, okay? I can listen to stuff that Prince wrote and Prince produced and not get that Prince feeling. It's not about the actual sound of the music. It's about that feeling. It's a feeling that I actually would say is kind of like glam music as well. But it's kind of a dirty glam, but a good dirty. And that's the feeling that I got off of this. And in particular, when I was thinking about glam music, there are certain points where I thought this felt very glamish. And if you see pictures of him, he's got a very interesting look and it's sort of intentionally somewhat androgynous. It's funny because his real name is Bowie. But the person he reminds me most of, in terms of musically, is actually Mark Bolan from T-Rex. That kind of dirty, sexy, soulful, musical mastery where you just can't quite figure out what's going on. This album keeps you just completely off balance the entire time you listen to it, from the beginning through the end. So when I say Prince, I don't mean Raspberry Beret. I mean chaos and disorder Prince. I mean the sort of late era, a lot more experimental, a lot less concerned with pop, and a lot more about studio mastery. And that's the thing, is that we're entering this moment, we're in this cultural moment. I call it the cyborg moment, right? All music is either computer assisted or consciously not computer assisted, okay? We are post-computer era. And so the musicians that do the best and most interesting work are those who are capable of being the best cyborg you can be. Cyborg being part man, part machine, part human, part machine. Let me correct that gender there. And the best musicians are either mostly computer, mostly human with a little bit of machine, or mostly machine with a little bit of human. They find some kind of balance and they use it to make the best possible music that they can. That's what this is. Yves Tumor is an electronic artist, but he's an electronic composer. He puts sounds together in ways which are very difficult to imagine and to conceive of. It even also reminds me a little bit of Brian Wilson from the Beach Boys, just in terms of its mastery that he's able to use. Sort of an invisible mastery throughout the entire album. It's very experimental. At times it's very sort of psychedelic. And that's part of this cultural moment as well. You know, actually, this reminds me a lot of the King Cruel album as well. King K. Rool. I don't know how you pronounce his name. And even a little bit of the VC Pines that I reviewed last week. Just this sense of like, you know, everything that's electronic here is never a crutch. It's always a tool. And it's a tool which, when it's used well, is as important as the strings on a guitar. So, those are some things that I love about it. That ineffable, indescribable Prince feeling I get from this album. The sense of a dirty glam, which is a beautiful feeling. And also, something that I describe as music that requires a forensic study. When you listen to this album, you are just like, what the hell is going on here? What is playing? Is that a sample? Is that a real drum beat? Is that the bass? Is that the same bass line? Did he change the bass line? Is the drummer changing? Who's singing? Is this Yves singing? This is a falsetto voice. Is this his falsetto voice? Is that a woman? Is that person playing clarinet? Is that person playing clarinet and saxophone at the same time? Are those fireworks? You have to get the album and you have to just listen to it and just like turn everything else off and just like listen carefully. You know, like on CSI, you know, okay, so the bullet came in at a 30% trajectory, and you're trying to figure out what makes this music so engaging. And that's part of, you know, I like to talk about the equation of each album. What makes an Yves Tumor song? First of all, a very concrete bass and drums foundation. No matter how wacky this guy gets with his samples and his sounds, there's bass and drums, which just creates a very enjoyable bass. So you're always rooted. It never goes too far into that realm of experimental exploration where you go, all right, but I do like to listen to music as well, right? He often has kind of really well chopped up samples that are looped in interesting ways. The samples are taken from everywhere. Let's see, a couple from different Korean music, Roy Harper and Jimmy Page song, this weird prog track, like he finds these samples everywhere. There's usually singing. The singing is often atmospheric. The lyrics don't always matter. The lyrics seem to be about romance for the most part, although there is an interesting bit later I'll get to. And always the question of like what's going on and who's doing what. If you read the liner notes, it says that he writes and composes everything, but he doesn't play that much music actually on the album. So what is he doing? That's how I get into the sort of Brian Wilson aspect of it, where I think he's more of a composer and an overseer than an actual player and doer, to the point where some of the songs he doesn't even really sing except for backups. So that's the kind of basic outline of what makes this Yves Tumor album so great and so fascinating. I mean, if I were you and I had never heard of this before, I would run out and listen to it right now. But let me go track by track. My pink Cadillac. And I was thinking about that earlier. That's a bad catchphrase. Track by track in my pink Cadillac. But pink Citroën? That doesn't rhyme. I'll go track by track in my pink Citroën here. And I'll describe to you what makes this album so good. First of all, the opening track, the opening loop, I was hooked. Dun, jing, boom, dun. Dun, 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 dun. I don't know where he found it. I did found it somewhere. I don't know where the sample comes from. But I'm going to play you the point where it goes from this crazy, awesome loop into the part where he sings and plays. And this gives you an idea of the exact album. This playful electronic selection mixed in with a great solid groove and avant-garde songwriting. 14 seconds. Let's listen. Okay, so That was Gospel for a New Century, and if you heard that and like that, you are going to love this album. I'm not sure any of it reaches this height again, but this is such a great high. It's such a wonderful album. The next track, Medicine Burn, has these insane drums with this rising guitar, very steady bass that keeps everything steady. But then just like there's all these sounds of these guitars going up and down and up and down. And right when he takes you to the limit, right when you're saying, Yves, I can't take this anymore, please stop, he stops. And there's quiet, relative quiet. And he's able to sing, and it's just voice and drums and a little bit of bass. And you feel this sense of relief that this anxiety-inducing avant-garde noise is taken out at exactly the right time. This is the best example of his Mark Bolan style singing. It really just sounds to me very, very Mark Bolan in the best possible way. I don't know what he's singing about. He's talking about like 7 heads and 600 teeth, very kind of psychedelic weirdness. But for this song, I want you to do something. Pay attention to what the drummer is doing at the end. He's not doing anything particularly, I don't know, flashy. But this song, because it's got all these like rises and falls, it has this languid quality to it. And the drummer shows this restraint with just these snare hits that he hits, where he's just slightly behind the beat, that he makes the song work. Yves, if you're out there, give your guitarist a raise. Did the leaf just come into focus? That's cool. I'm like in a little jungle here. My wife, she loves these plants, and I always like almost kill them when I film. So I'm just gonna leave it there. Moving through space. So just really pay attention to this wonderful drumming and all of this band. I mean, the band is so consistently good in this record, you wouldn't think, like if I told you, hey, listen to this crazy avant-garde electronic composer, you wouldn't expect to get virtuoso musicianship, but you do. Then the next track, Identity Trade, has another great example of things getting crazy and then dropping things out. And this is what makes him an electronic artist, right? This is what makes a good electronic artist. Knowing how to sit there with a computer filled with tracks and noise and sound and knowing when to take something out and when to put something back in. That's what Yves is able to do. This is the one where I think there's a clarinet. But then the clarinet, I think, turns into a saxophone. Does that happen? Can you do that? Can you turn into a saxophone if you're a clarinet? I don't know, but it's great. Very bizarre sample as well here. Then the track Kerosene. This is the most like directly Prince sound. Actually sounds like Prince because the way the vocals are. It's a duet with this woman. And she sings in this weird way at the end where she almost sounds like she's in the Cranberries or something, like very affected vocal styles. I can't quite tell what they're singing about. It seems like a love song, but a kind of a dirty love song. You know, like not dirty like gross or sex ridden, but like nasty, like slimy love. You know, like I need you, you're my kerosene. Kerosene isn't very sexy. The next track, Has Fallen Lights, is basically an interlude, but it's very nice because he uses disco strings in here, so it's just kind of evening things out, which leads into Romanticist, which is just one of the great bass and drum grooves throughout the entire album. If you're a fan of bass and drum grooves, this album is awesome. Some very good singing over top, maybe the clearest lyrics, just kind of a romance song, and there's this like explosion of sound, and then you hear these fireworks, and then the fireworks are going to dominate the next song as well, Dream Palette. I would say if you want to get a good example of what Yves Tumor is, Yves Palette is the second song you should listen to. This requires complete forensic analysis. You have to take this to the lab, to the person with the microscope, who has the flirtatious relationship with the officer, and will they or won't they, and you got to take Dream Palette and put it under the microscope and try and figure out, you know, is this the ash from a cigarette from Spain or from Portugal? Okay, like you really have to study this song. There's like a really nice sloppy drum beat that's played well, like bass that goes kind of high and low, guitars that attack and retreat. There's a sort of a high voice in the back that's echoing a sort of mid-range voice in the middle, and then there's like this strange drum beat and like double-tracked vocals, and then at the end there's all these fireworks sounds, and the whole is beautiful. It sounds great. It sounds like a cohesive, well-written song. But when I just describe it to you in elements, it's almost incomprehensible. And this again, the lyrics are sort of clear. Is this confidential love? I just don't know what that means. So I can understand the words, but I don't understand the sense. I don't think, there's only one line, and I'll get to that soon, in the entire album that made sense to me. But it's okay. This really is more about the feeling, the atmosphere the album is able to create. I've been watching a lot of videos about the video game Super Mario Maker. And people create these levels that are as hard and chaotic as possible. And this song kind of reminded me of that to a certain extent, where there's like 30 bosses and like 50 shells flying all over the place. And you're just the listener just kind of running through trying to get the little infinity star and make your way to the pipe. That's a stupid, dorky reference. But I think if there's a Venn diagram of people who understand that video game and people who understand that album, you'll be like, Skye, that's it. Listening to this song is a Kaizo level of Mario. Okay, the next track, Superstars. Seriously, the drumming on this album, it's some of the best drumming I've heard this year. This great stutter step drum beat, which is the sort of quiet bit before this guitar comes in. There's falsetto. I don't think it's him singing falsetto. I think he's singing a lower register in the back. But what's nice about this, and this is the usage of bass, he knows how to use bass to calm a track down. He's a master of getting you agitated and anxious and then calming you down. It's almost like old style basso continuo. Like the bass just keeps going, but it doesn't just play the same thing over and over again. But this kind of continuous bass line goes and keeps you at home while you are just going on this fantastic journey. The next track, that's the one that contains the sample from the Samurai of Prague. So really obscure samples. This guy is digging deep in the crates. The crates that maybe you shouldn't dig into. The Samurai of Prague, that has got to be a terrible song. I don't know. Folie imposée, imposed craziness, is nice because this is just a guitar added. So it's him playing keyboard and the drum samples are kind of clips and strange. And then this is where I believe we have the actual voice and thoughts of Yves Tumor for the first time on the album. He's not talking about 600 teeth. He's not talking about anything abstract. He is saying that he is sad and desperate. The most clearest lyrics on the entire album are saying that he can't escape and that he is addicted to his torment. And when we understand that addicted to his torture. Is it torture or tormented? Addicted to his torment. When we understand that the album is called Heaven to a Tortured Mind, maybe that's what this whole thing is. It's all about if a tortured mind existed and it could be in heaven, it would be in this album. That is a really far out concept. This guy's really smart. Hi, Bo. I'm talking to my fans again. You're sunny and hot? Good. You're not my fans. You're my auditors. Okay. But then at the end, there's a little bizarre flute note. And you go, what is that? And very often at the end, I'll add that to the Yves Tumor equation. At the very end, something will happen. You'll be like, what is that? Like, it'll just be like some crazy sounds just out of nowhere. Some kind of unsettling element that I don't know. It's like you're eating a meal, and then the last bite, it was like, I had like a whole chunk of pepper in it. You're like, oh, that's okay. I mean, I like pepper, but wow. I think that's part of this whole tortured mind experimental aesthetic. The next track, Strawberry Privilege, I'm going to make the most obscure music reference I could possibly make. This has him singing in falsetto, but it's the worst track on the album, I believe. It's not bad, but it's not good. It actually reminds me of the album Picnic of Love by AC. A stands for, well, something to do with your butt, and C stands for the worst word you can have for a female genitalia. They were a punk band that did very aggressive, hateful songs, but they did one album that was a joke love album. It's a beauty. It's an awesome album. And the whole time they're singing in falsetto, and I could not get that out of my mind when he was singing this falsetto, which is why I think that the song Dream Palette, was it Dream Palette or Romanticist? some other song, no, Superstars, when he had someone else singing in falsetto, maybe that's a better thing to do, you know? And he's like many other electronic artists, where it doesn't really matter if you hear his voice. He is everywhere. The next track, Asteroid Blues, just a great, I call it a psychotic groove. Drum, bass, awesome. Totally bass driven, but then there's these bizarre sounds, and then at the end, the unsettling element, the chunk of pepper that you ate with the last bite is just these like chattering noises. The last track is A Greater Love. Not my favorite, but maybe the most like intimate feeling, like you feel like you're actually connected to a human being in this one. But you know, there's a lot of people in this category right now. You know, this like psychedelic, electronic, neo soul. Gee, Willikers, what can we give to a genre like this? You know, I mean, like, how do you categorize Thundercat or Flying Lotus or King K. Rool or this? Like, what are these people all doing? Why are they all doing it kind of at the same time, sort of in a similar way? I don't know, but it's exciting. So, listen, it's one of the things I talk about on this channel. You must buy music. You have to buy it. You just have to. You don't have to buy this, but just buy some music, okay? Support artists because they don't get enough money on streaming, okay? Just buy some music. I chose to spend 26 pounds, baby, pounds, on buying this album on vinyl because it was that good. Okay, I promised you a Knoxville story. When I was probably 19 or 20, I was very influenced by the TV show The Simpsons. And I also like to go for drives with my friend Brad. Here's me and Brad. And you see, we used to go to Canada all the time, but there was an ice storm. So because we were so inspired by The Simpsons and their episode where they go to Knoxville, we decided we would drive down to Knoxville. Speaking of Brian Wilson, look at me over there, huh? I mean, that's me. I got a real Brian Wilson vibe going. So we decided to drive to Knoxville to be like The Simpsons. This is before my brother would meet his future wife, who's from Knoxville. And the whole joke in The Simpsons is that it sucks going to Knoxville. And if you read a little bit about Yves' life, he basically says it sucks coming from Knoxville. Doesn't matter. Here we were going. And it took us 14 hours to drive there from Boston. We slept in the car for 2 hours at a truck stop. And then we went to the Sun Sphere of the World Fair fame. And in the Simpsons episode, it's funny because they go to the Sun Sphere, but it had been closed and changed to the Wig Sphere. And they were angry. And we went to the Sun Sphere after driving for 14 hours, and it was closed. And so, much like Nelson did in The Simpsons, I threw a rock at the Sun Sphere. So you can actually see me right there with a rock in my hand, throwing a rock at the Wig Sphere, Sun Sphere. We got in the car and drove home. 28 hours of driving for 2 hours of enjoyment of the beautiful city of Knoxville. Okay, there's my Knoxville story. Okay, anyways, Yves Tumor, great album. Thank you to the person who suggested it. I should have written down your name to thank you, but I really do appreciate the growth of this channel and that people are reacting to the way that I think and talk about music, because that's why I do this. Okay, until next time, for Toby Bow, the lead singer of AC, who died, unfortunately, a few years ago, and Mark Bolan, there's the camera.